So I want to dig into that a little bit, where you're saying you dug into a particular metric and it kind of indicated to you what the issue was. How do you know about that correlation between that particular metric and he probably has these tight muscles? Like where does that link come into play?
It was an organic discovery for me. I looked at his data and I decided. I sat down and I spent 8 hours in front of my screen. And as you know, I like charts. I created a whole bunch of charts and I tried essentially in data, you want to find a chart that plateaus, right? You want to find at some point performance no longer improves when you expect it to improve. So you start charting things and, power and speed, power and stride length. And then I noticed stride length didn't improve. And then that gave me ideas. So you kind of organically dig deeper and you find something and then you kind of latch on like a dog and you don't let it go and you kind of dissect the data that pertains to that particular metric as much as possible. In this case, I started looking at, well, what are the factors that affect stride length? Okay, it could be power. Does it correlate with power? And no, it doesn't. With speed, no, it doesn't. And then power per unit of time. That's when I really kind of the light bulb went off and I said, well, his stride length should increase because if you push harder off the ground, you should move farther. And
Hmm.
then I started doing some thinking about, what could it be? Does he overstride? But then there's other data such as G-force impact forces that weren't increasing. So I know he wasn't overstriding on the front end.
Right.
And so I asked him, are you tight when you do this? How can you move? How's your movement? And we did some testing for hip flexors and psoas, and the results were, well, they're kind of tight. Let's start stretching. So it wasn't a great insight that I had all of a sudden. It was, let's dig in and find out until we find the solution. And it was a great experience, to be honest with you. I mean, it was basically what I really enjoy doing on the computer. The data actually all paid off.
I feel like that whole scenario is basically like data science gone right, is where you just keep digging and digging and going through the granular. We were talking about this before we got going about marketing in particular, but just how when you have enough data and you figure out what to do with it, it can tell you things that you wouldn't be able to see intuitively without just almost a coincidence of, like, say you were watching a video of him or something and thought about, like, once you have all that data, it's
And especially nowadays where you're no longer geographically constrained. I mean, this is an athlete that lives in Italy. I've never met him. I've never had a video of him running.
right,
This would have been, if you run with someone, you can probably see, hey, you know what? You do a track workout, your stride kind of doesn't look right.
right.
But without seeing that, without having access to the physical presence of the athlete, the data is really quite amazing in what it can give you. I never really expected it to be quite as powerful as it's turning out to be. And especially in something like running, where on the bike, you have 3 points of contact, right? You have your pedals. So there's only so much you can do with the data in terms of biomechanics. But the
Right.
biomechanics is almost free to do whatever it wants on the run because you spend so much time in the air
Hmm.
that we're finding, and I think other people are doing much more impressive work than I am. We're finding so many correlations and so many things that can be diagnosed with this running in terms of diagnosed as in form corrections, that it,
Hmm.
it it really is revolutionizing how run training is happening.
And so it kind of brings me to the point, and I think the old school method, certainly the method I grew up with, was that there is not a right way to run, although I disagree with it nowadays for the most part. There are notable exceptions. Have you seen videos of, like, Tim Don running?
Yes,
Yeah, it's not pretty,
but
or at
again,
least it didn't used to be.
the visual cues, I think, is what people were focused on, is your arms and your knees have to drive a certain way. The
Right.
data doesn't really care about what you
Okay.
look like when you run. It's essentially you're looking at the stick figure in run power, because the stride pod at least has three accelerometers in the X, Y, and Z uh, cardinal directions, essentially.
Right.
So you can break down your power. Let's say you put out 300 watts, and 200 of those are in horizontal power. The rest are in vertical and oscillatory power, lateral power. What that tells you is, I don't care what you look like, you are wasting a third of your power in flopping around and bouncing
Right.
around.
Right.
So when we look at form, I'm not talking about how you look. I'm talking about how you can become the most efficient. There is the one metric that I'm sure you read more of than you wanted to in my articles, the running effectiveness.
Mhm.
That is essentially what you want to do. You want to get the most horsepower devoted to moving forward that you can become the most effective runner. And that is actually all that we care about. Whatever you do, if you can move your upper body or your flop your arms around or do whatever it is you want to do, as long as your watts turn into speed, I don't think anybody should care about it. I think we spent a lot of effort and a lot of time trying to force people to conform to a specific upper body movement. And for
Mhm.
people that for whom it's not natural, I think that's actually a waste of energy. You're actually forcing them to waste more energy to try and look good when you really all you want to do is make them go faster.
Right. Yeah, I like to pick on Tim because I actually got to see him race in person in 2010 at Hy-Vee. But yeah, he has a lot of, at least at that time, again, this is almost a decade ago now. He has a lot of upper body movement. It's this rotational movement, which you don't often see as being productive in most people. But he runs like a madman. I mean, I'm pretty sure he won that race.
He set the
Um,
Ironman world record in Brazil. Was it
yeah,
last year? So
right.
he's pretty quick.
Yeah, I was like, so I always feel like as soon as I'm like, there is a right way to run, then you see somebody that's doing like Tim that does not run with, I'll say, conventional kind of aesthetics, but still just kicks everybody's ass.
I mean, in the end, it's kind of like a car. It doesn't matter what it looks like, how much horsepower it has. If it doesn't convert it into acceleration and speed, it doesn't really matter. And in running, if you can put the watts down on the ground and turn them into meters per second, have at it. Do however you want to do it. Just turn those watts into meters per second, and we're gonna be fine.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I want to shift a little bit. I think you're saying earlier before we got going that you come from a finance background. Is that why you're so like quantitatively minded?
I think I've always been quantitatively minded beforehand. I mean, I took the long route to adulthood. I mean, I went to college and I was a physics and astrophysics double major. Then I got my degree in environmental science. Then I went for a master's in conservation biology, and then I got my master's in finance. And I was a trader, and I selected mortgage bonds because they were the most complex instruments out there. So I've always liked numbers. They give me some kind of a calm feeling that, hey, you know what, if I can wade through these numbers, everything is going to be okay. I was never the most socially outward person, so I wasn't a marketer. I was the
Mhm.
backroom guy that only was brought out when you needed to get the answer to some hard questions. But numbers are numbers, and I just love to make numbers into solutions. And I found that once I started training, I started understanding a few things, and then I got some education, and I realized that, hey, you know what? The numbers can really help me. I can turn them into performance. I can turn them into positive things, and they never talk back, and they never argue with you, and they're almost always right.
Yeah, I that's kind of the nice thing I'll agree with about numbers is that the numbers are what they are. It's not a matter of negotiating. It's simply a matter of trying to understand and have them kind of reveal what they're trying to tell you rather than there's much more nuance to, interacting with a person
Yes.
versus figuring out what the numbers are. I mean, that's um I did calculus through high school, and after high school I said, okay, I'm done with math. And
Nope.
no, no, for whatever reason, no. Somehow I ended up with a math major, and it was just like, oh, I'll take Calc 2 and I'll take Calc 3, and for me it was a matter of I like solving problems, and going through these math classes, you're learning how to solve problems and create these solutions and build these logical worlds, and it has nothing to do with like the soft skills of that interpersonal skills that it doesn't come, I think, as easily to either of us as it does to some other people. Then you really have to work on that. So it's, at least to me, it's almost, I think you kind of mentioned this, like almost more comforting just to like work with the numbers, deal with the things that are very almost straightforward versus like, how do I
There's
deal with this person and all of their emotional baggage and what they're dealing with today and whether they're hungry and
there's no ambiguity with the numbers. Like you said before,
Right.
they are what they are. So there's no reason to get mad at them. It's a little more relaxing because it allows you to take a step back and be more clinical about whatever the situation may be, and you just focus on it. Not to mention that, math is pervasive. I mean, it's called the universal language for a reason because, whether I was in physics, in finance, in conservation biology, or in environmental science, math was the common thread. And
Right.
as I'm sure everybody has heard that, but you never believe it until you experience it. I mean, my oldest is in college now, and she's asking why she has to take Calc 3 and 4, and the answer is always the same: because you're always going to need them, no matter what you end up doing in life. Math is always going to be the underlying current. Even we were talking earlier about marketing. There's math involved in marketing.
Oh yeah.
Most people that go into marketing want to avoid math altogether, but nowadays with data analytics and the amount of data and big data that we have, math is pervasive in everything and anything we do. So I mean, it's a good thing, and it can be a bad thing at times. It can drive you bananas, but more often than not, it solves the problem.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering. I mean, you have a whole journey. I think I asked you in email a long time ago before you wrote the articles, although I've forgotten. So I mean, you grew up in Italy playing
Yep.
soccer, and then you went through all of these progressions that you just gave us. So physics, and then your two different masters in finance, and here you are coaching. Um, do you have any form of ADD, or like how do you
I,
continue on this kind of odd progression to where you are now?
I in Italy when I was growing up back in the 80s, there was no ADD. It was just overactive children. So
Okay.
I have no doubt that I would be diagnosed with ADD, were I to turn into a child now and go back through school. But I think it's just I've always been told by my teachers and even my grandparents, always stay curious, always try and find something new. And I find it interesting and exciting. I mean, the idea of just not learning anything on a daily basis kind of scares me, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
So I really look forward to getting on the computer and kind of looking at data and just seeing, what can I discover? What can I figure out today? And it just keeps your mind active and keeps life interesting.
Yeah. How many athletes are you working with now?
Right now, I only have about 15.
Okay.
It's I'm
That's a pretty manageable number.
Yes, and it's I tend to grow fairly slowly over time.
Yeah.
I make changes very quickly, but then I try and pace myself in growing because I want to provide the level of service that I think is appropriate. And as you can see with some of the data analysis, it takes time. So it's I'm looking at,
Yeah, I
at
mean,
at a lot of
I think you
things.
said you sat down and like looked at the data on that one athlete for like 8 hours. I mean, it's a whole this whole day dedicated to one person's one problem when you have, everybody else you have to contend with as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, going back to that ADD, that 8 hours I think felt like 15 minutes because I sat down in the morning and then I got called for dinner and I was like, wait, what happened to the day? But I think that's the exciting thing. You're doing something you like when you kind of get lost in your daily activities as opposed to looking at the clock, hoping for that 5 o'clock hour to arrive.
Yeah, right. Before we go, so I ask everybody this question because it's kind of universal. Since we're coming up on the end of the year, I know I'm going to have to come up with a new question for next year. But for now, you're going to get the same question I ask everybody. I like to ask after a hard workout or a race, kind of your thought there, doesn't matter. What food would you choose for recovery if you could only choose one food for the rest of your life?
Ooh, that's both a tough one and an easy one. I mean, I'm an Italian and I love to eat, so a plate of pasta or gnocchi is what would be my go-to. If I had to do one, that would have to be it. I know it's not very original, but it's what I would go for.
Hey, that's okay. That's the big thing is I love to hear what people like to eat because I get all kinds of response. I get like I'll call them like PC answers, which aren't wrong. None of these are wrong answers. But things that are healthy for you, and you would expect people to say,
Oh yeah.
this is what I eat. And I get other people that are like, I have a beer, or I have pizza, or what. It's interesting to see where people focus on for recovery, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's both.
Well, I think that's the biggest weakness in a lot of people's training approaches is the recovery part. People focus very, very hard and work very, very hard in their training, But then, and for a lot of people, it's not a, it's a necessity. It's not a luxury they have. Is, hey, I work out in the morning, then I got to go to work, and I got to grab breakfast on my way to the office. But I find that when you focus on that recovery and try and get that, the 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 protein to carb ratio within the first 30 minutes, and then continue with your carb, ingestion with that 8 to 12 hours after your workout, for a long workout, gets you ready for the next workout. It really helps. I mean, I tend to be, as a data geek, I tend to log everything that I eat, and I tend to plan, hey, you know what? I know I need X amount of protein today, but your body can only absorb X amount in one sitting. So I plan out all my meals throughout the day. You can get a little crazy, but there are tangible benefits to doing so. And I think a lot of people, a lot of athletes especially, would benefit with a little bit of extra planning on their recovery and feeding.
Yeah, and I think that comes up almost every time I talk to a registered dietitian or nutritionist. Anybody that comes on, that like that's what they do. We always talk about, and I'm especially bad at this, is the planning part. We need to plan out instead of, because I'm running 2 businesses and I do the podcast and I have family life and all these things. Got to take the dog for a walk because he's staring over at me. You have to do all these things, and then food almost becomes on the back burner, even though it should be, right up front as a priority. So that's part of the reason I love to ask people that question.
It's a great question, and I think it gives you a lot of insight on how focused they are on their training, because there are some athletes that have everything scheduled, and they make all their meals on the weekend, and they have it timed down to the second and to the gram. And then there's other people that take more of a, not nonchalant, but hey, you know what? This is fun. This is supposed to be fun, and I can't just plan every minute of my life going through it. But it wouldn't be nice if we all could have a private chef that has it all timed out and serves our food to us when we need it.
Yeah, that used to be my goal, but I don't. Now I'm like, I'll call myself retired, but since I don't have as many like high performance goals, I'm like, do I really ever need a private chef? Like, I'll probably skip on that one, but.
Yeah, I don't know.
Marco,
I mean, I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, right. Marco, if people want to find you, where can they find you, learn more about what you're doing, get in touch with you if they want to see about having you coach them?
Sure. My website is Nicoli Coaching, oneword.com. And you can find all the information and reach out to me. I always like to talk to clients. Or even prospects, or even athletes that are not looking for coaching, but they just want to have a conversation and ask some questions. As you can tell, I love to talk about this stuff. So I'm always happy to talk to athletes and answer their questions, whether they're interested in coaching or not.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on today, Marco.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great talking to you.